All right, and welcome back to FYI, the For Your Institution podcast presented by Mongoose. I'm your host, Gil Rogers, and today we're continuing conversations from the 2023 NACAC Conference in Baltimore. In this episode, our guests will talk about their thoughts concerning the future, including both the challenges and developments they see coming down the road. Let's first take a minute to get reacquainted with our panel as they introduce themselves one more time.
I'm Carlos Cano. I'm the Director of Admission Communications and Marketing at Georgian Court University.
My name is Courtney Minden. I am currently the principal of Minden Advisory Group.
I am Dana Lambert. I am a public school counselor at West Milford Township High School in West Milford, New Jersey. I am a past president of NJACAC. I am a college fair chair for NACAC. I am also rolling onto the NACAC Admissions Practices Committee.
I'm Jen Nectarline, college and career counselor at Hunterdon Central Regional High School, which is in central New Jersey.
My name is Kayla Groban with Towson University here in Maryland. I work on our freshman recruitment team.
My name is Kevin O'Sullivan. I'm our Senior Vice President of Enrollment Management and Student Affairs at Iona University up in New Rochelle, New York.
My name is Sarah Smith. I am a school counselor at Triton Regional High School in Runnymede, New Jersey. I am immediate past president of New Jersey ACAC. And I am also the career exploration counselor at my high school, in addition to being a school counselor.
I'm Scott Novak, Chief Development Officer at Carnegie, and I was the founder of Underscore. And we merged with Carnegie back in 2021.
My name is Todd Reinhardt. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Enrollment at the University of Denver. In our division at DU, that includes undergraduate admission, which is centralized, and then we have financial aid, which is both undergrad and grad.
My name is Janie Stevens. I'm Associate Director of Recruitment and Events at UMKC, University of Missouri, Kansas City.
And I'm Laura Thomas. I serve as the Director of Admissions at the University of Missouri, Kansas City at UMKC.
So first I ask each guest to pull out their crystal ball and tell me what changes they've seen and what they think the future looks like for their corner of the higher ed universe.
I think it's changed in the sense that, and especially because of the pandemic. So the pandemic, I think, forced us to go into that virtual space. So the Zoom meeting, video conference space, which worked for a bit. And then I think for a lot of students, because it was not only how they were doing kind of life in general, but it's also how they were schooling and how they were trying to do different things all through the same medium, it became very redundant and very just mundane. One of the things that I have found in the last 2 years, being back out on the road with students, engaging with them, is they want to know about our institutions and they want to know what we can offer, but they want us to know more about them. So a lot of times the best conversations that I have with students are the conversations that let me learn more about what they're feeling and what they're going through in this process, as opposed to, we have this major and we have these sports and these activities. Being able to ask them what keeps you up at night about the college admissions process. And they'll say, well, it just seems like a lot. One of the things that I've heard a lot too is that they're getting a lot of information from a lot of different places. So it's difficult for them to really figure out what's what, who's right, who's wrong. And my direction, my guidance to them has been, well, listen for what is constant and what is the same. And if you hear it from multiple people, that probably means that's something you should probably take a look at and consider. So overall, again, just listening to students and really engaging with them on that more personal level, removing the institution or the place that you work for from the conversation and just have an organic conversation about them. What are you doing? What classes are you taking? Are your classes hard? Are they difficult? Do you feel like you're ready for college? And the reality is some students just aren't. They're not ready for higher education for one reason or another, and that's okay. So how can we get them to whatever their next step is? And maybe it's higher ed, maybe it's not. But again, having those conversations about what motivates them and what is their next step in their plan.
I think one of the big things, we were just talking about this, is direct admission. I mean, it's sort of shocking to a lot of the traditional administrators you're used to saying you have a 20% admit rate and then giving a holistic review. I think it's really interesting thinking about ways direct admission gives the students more control as to what is feasible for them. I think it's a grand experiment to then see success rates. And I have a feeling students are going to be just as successful or more successful with a different format. With one of my jobs, I dealt with the question of tuition reset. And what was really fascinating is we spoke to a local school that had done the reset. And a year later, I'll back up and say, they did the tuition reset in order to promote access and attract more people of color. They found that it actually detracted from person of color recruiting and that it advantaged the white middle class families more than first generation and students of color. So that's really interesting. I want to dive into that. I want to sort of think about the why and how we can tweak that. I think ROI is a word or a term that I've used more than I ever have in my career. Is you pick up the Wall Street Journal, you pick up the Boston Globe. There's almost every week there's a version of, is college worth it? And I still believe to my core that college is worth it. But how are we providing the product? And are we doing these students disservice with the traditional on campus for 4 years, which is an arbitrary number, by the way. It was never really, it just sort of started as you keep them in college until they're 22 and then they're seen as adults. And there's no real like educational benefit to that 4 years. So what if you could do it in 3 years or do an internship or get some experiential learning? We have the technology to make these experiences so fruitful and to really make the outcomes matter to any student who applies to college. We can still have the quad, we can still have mediocre dining hall food and a roommate, but does college have to be packaged in the same way at the same cost just because that's how we've always done it? I think when I figure that out, I will not be at NACAC. I will be on the Riviera in my chalet preparing to get my yacht because that's the magic question is where are the costs going? And yes, how can you both fund but also support? And on both sides of how can the college be supported? How can the student be supported? So, I mean, that is an interesting question. I think somewhat of an a la carte packaging could be an idea. So for this cost, you can get this level of educational attainment. At this cost, you can get this. It's an unformed idea. I'm actually thinking about it right now. But if you could design it so that everyone will get you the ROI and the outcomes, then it's a worthwhile product. It's a worthwhile experience. It helps the school's bottom line so that they can continue to serve their students. I used to say when I was at Babson, we would be in senior leadership meetings saying, we're not afraid of Harvard. We're afraid of Google and Amazon because they're going to do this. They're going to start credentialing in such a way where you could even do a subscription-based education, like a masterclass, where you pay for the platform and you can acquire certificates until you ultimately have a degree, or you can take your, poker chips and go home and feel like you've attained the right level for you. That's viable. And I think big tech can prove it. So we need to be ahead of big tech. And it's very hard for higher ed. I don't think it's going to come from the schools that we're seeing in the US News top 50. I think it's going to be a school that is bold, that is experimental, and are going to have the resources to have a proof of concept without the glare of the expectations around Harvard, Princeton, Yale. You could also argue that it would be Harvard, Princeton, Yale, but I just don't think that they're ready to let go. When I was at Harvard, I once asked why we had our exams after holiday break, and they said, because we've been doing that since the 1600s. What if you can be that bold school who turns it on its head and does not fear retribution? And where we're going with this is there the possibility for college as a startup? Can you be a school that calls itself a startup educational opportunity, where Harvard, Yale, Princeton might be ExxonMobil, IBM, Google? What about these schools that are willing to try something new? And what we're not talking about is how the student demand for it. And I'm interested to see where Gen Y goes with this. There's a good chance that they're not going to be turned on by the traditional pedagogy, the great books, the biochem, the liberal arts. And I'm not saying those aren't important. They're just so important. But is there room at the table for these other options that sort of fit this generation a lot better and can respond to what our society needs? And to be clear, I am a liberal arts graduate. Nobody really gets trained to be an admission officer. So I credit the liberal arts and get me where I am here today. But what else? It's like, but and.
If I had a magic wand, I'd eliminate early decision completely. It's certainly something that gives unfair advantage to people that have the ability to pay for it. I work with a population that doesn't, so it doesn't benefit them. It certainly benefits the schools. I don't have as much of a problem with early action. I just wish people would understand the differences in school calendars. Our calendar doesn't align necessarily to a college's calendar. I am not a big fan of things like direct admit, which is a new phenomenon that started last year, where colleges can access data from Common App and admit a student who never applied. It has led to mass confusion with my students and probably the opposite effect that colleges hoped for. I think they hoped it would entice kids. My students were like, they're admitting me without even looking at my documents. Why would I even consider it? So those kind of things, if I could wave a magic wand and get rid of the media, I mean, the media panic is real. The media will be the first to say there's less kids going to college. It's not really statistically true if they look at the stats. There's a decline, but not a drastic drop off. The media will post stories that say, ninth grader hasn't played football yet, already committed to XY university. That's not reality. And that creates unnecessary panic among athletes and students. It leads to people encouraging students to do things that they just can't do. I tend to tide. That's what we tend to do as school counselors. Not that we're the no people, we're the truth people. So we tend to stand on facts, but the panic is real. The student admitted to 7 Ivies or 25 colleges or whatever it is, I have less of a problem with, only because that could motivate another student. I'll tell my students flat out, I don't want to process 35 college applications. I think 35 is the most I've hit. I'll do it. But let's make the process smarter. Let's try and figure it out. But those can motivate kids. I don't begrudge those kids. They did the work. The scholarship thing, yeah, everybody gets that wrong. A scholarship is a 1-year deal. They owe the student more. They can't. And that's where I come from. You clearly didn't do your research because every Ivy is completely different. There's a big difference between going to a Yale and going to a Dartmouth, and you didn't do your research and you didn't do your homework. If you've applied to 75 schools, you did it because you didn't do your homework. And I'd rather you do your homework. But I'm in a position where I can advise students when you have counselors that have giant caseloads. And make no mistake, mine is large. I have over 300 students, probably close to 350. But when I talk to colleagues that have 400 or 500 in other states, yeah, that leads to kids just applying because there's nobody there to advise them.
That's pretty cut and dry for me. And it has to do with just increasing costs. I mean, our students are looking at price tags over $70,000, $80,000 a year at institutions. And with the multitude of schools we have in the country and beyond, there are absolutely ways to develop a college list of reasonable institutions, but the cost is astronomical. And, there's kids certainly getting assistance that need it. And there's students that are getting the assistance they've worked hard to earn, but college is just really expensive. So I'm finding myself having more and more conversations about alternate pathways. Obviously, community college being an excellent choice, but I'm here talking with colleagues about trade school options, about gap year options, employment options. So I think my overarching constant concern is affordability for kids. And that honestly starts with the most basic things like an application fee. I know we have access to fee waivers for our kids, but I look at some of these institutions and what they're charging just to get your foot in the door to be looked at. And that's concerning. I would say, by staff, it's concerning because we want our students to be mindful and take their time through the process. But for a 17 or 18-year-old, it's exciting. I often think of my students' generation now. I want an answer now. I want to get this over with. Whereas we'd like them to take their time with it and work through the application process, learn a little bit about themselves through it. But when they're presented with an opportunity to fill out an application on the spot and not pay a fee, which is great, and get a decision right away, they're all over it. So I think for them, it's great. For us, we want to take a step back and make sure our students are applying to the right schools, finding the right fits, things like that. So I'm all for it in some cases, but I'm also one to take an approach with my students that let's really think this through.
First generation, that's a big passion of mine. Being first gen myself brings that to home. So how are we supporting these students, whether it is through scholarships or financially, things like that, but also what can we do at the university level to support them coming from high school? It's a huge step and their parents or families or brothers, sisters, siblings aren't there to help them. So that's definitely a big passion of mine and something that I look forward to hearing from other professionals that have been in higher education for a lot longer than me to kind of teach me a couple of things to bring back. So looking at our review process, can we review these students a bit differently? Can we get information from their school profile or from the school counselor to help us determine if they're going to be a good fit and be successful at the university level? Because that's all what we really want to is, that great retention rate and to make sure our students are graduating. So besides, that financial scholarship piece of it, what else can we do and what support can we have at the university? So excited and eager to learn in those sessions and then bring that back, even outside of admissions, bring that back to our advising teams, our career center, our financial aid and scholarship offices.
I think it's different based on who I talk to, right? Everybody's got a little bit of a different approach or a way that they're going to try to tackle their challenges. For a lot of my colleagues that I'm talking to, right, the commitment, the institutional commitment to make sure that they're getting more boots on the ground, visiting more places, creating those opportunities for conversations to learn about how different circumstances have impacted students' ability to proceed to college or to continue on to college or shape them as they were in their college, formative years throughout high school, right? Utilizing that information to help guide them.
I am very resistant to change, and the students are very resilient to change. So I think we've seen that in the past 3 years with COVID and lockdown and virtual learning. I had a hard time adjusting where the kids were it was like seamless for them. I think it's just how we can best help our students in any transitional period and trying to figure out the best way that we can guide them to make the best decisions for them. So whether it be that they take the paper SAT before it moves to digital, we are piloting the PSAT in October, and that's all digital. So we're giving them a flavor of things to come. In New Jersey, they take all their state assessments on the computer. So I think that it's going to be a smoother transition, but at the same time, there's still some kids who are just very resistant to change. I think there's going to be a lot more talk about artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, how to incorporate those into the classroom. I mean, it's coming to the forefront now, but I think in 10, 13 years, it's going to be a mainstay. It's here to stay. We just have to learn how to use it thoughtfully. And I think that's going to be something that's moving forward and in the future. And I think a lot of some of the other, like the SCOTUS decision and things like that, it's all going to depend on politics and who's in office and who's making the decisions. And I think that it can go either way, depending upon who's making those big ticket decisions. But I think that we are a world full of adaptation. And I think that in general, no matter what happens in 10, 13 years, we're going to figure it out and use things like the NACAC Conference to network with others and try to figure everything out together.
I think that higher ed in general, unfortunately, suffers from that's the way it's always been done. I think we are on the cusp of major change and how students are being informed about colleges and how they recruit students. We've got the enrollment cliff coming. So I just think there's so much change that is going to come in the next year or two, even that I think 10 years from now, I don't have the crystal ball. I wish I did, but I think it's going to be very, very different than it was or it has been. I think there's going to be a lot of companies that rise to the top. I do believe that Carnegie will be one of them that's going to provide the right core services to support colleges, universities to help them meet their goals. And I think you'll see less and less of the smaller companies in time.
What I'm really seeing more on the university and college side is just innovation on what they're offering and the value they're providing for students. I don't think anyone's figured out the business model part yet, and that's something I think everyone's going to keep working on. But maybe new and different academic programs or new ways of delivering those programs. And certainly we've seen a lot of things going on with online. I'm at a very traditional residential campus for undergrad. At the grad level, we have plenty of online options and programs. But undergrad, we're still the traditional residential school, and we're going to put our value on that and on smaller classes and having faculty teach those classes.
I think one really forefront way is all of our new branding materials, all of the new content that we're pushing out. It's a lot more current student based. We have a lot more alumni engagement to really show what our students are doing on campus. We have a new campaign, Kansas City is our classroom, where we're really highlighting what our students are doing out in the community and how our community interacts with our students. So branding's a big one, just making sure we're showing what's really happening. It's a lot of uncut, unphotoshopped views of our campus and what's happening. as well as just the conversations that we're having, I think are a lot more straightforward and pulling to the needs of our students and the realities that they're feeling within the city.
And I think not just UMKC, but other universities are now being forced to actually acknowledge and own who they are as an institution. So if they're not truly an urban institution, they can't say they're an urban institution anymore. They have to show it. And so if they're going to be truly authentic. So knowing if you're not going to be the big school that has 20,000 students showing up with all these athletic events, but you're more tailored to having a degree program and you get to have an internship and have a job before you graduate. If that's who your institution is, then that's who you're actually showing yourself as, instead of trying to be like your Ivy Leagues or anybody else that you're not truly are.
And finally, some guests let us in on some of their best pieces of advice and optimism about the paths going forward.
I think right now, my biggest fear within this industry is that we're losing a lot of the entry-level counselors who see this as a calling and see this as a way to really make a difference in the world. So my first advice is just stick with it, find a mentor, speak up. Don't be afraid to ask those hard questions in a town hall meeting or anytime, depending on your campus culture, but find the president who's going to listen to you, find the right people who are going to get as excited as you are about this, and just be bold.
Seeing everyone back out is awesome. I mean, even though it was good in Houston, but it wasn't back to what we're used to. I mean, just for me, having been blessed enough to work in this industry for almost 20 years, this is in many ways an annual reunion, right? And you get to get back out. It allows you to come back with a fresh mind in terms of what are some new ideas out there, right? What are other schools doing? What are they implementing that we're not doing that could work well for us? And some of it challenges you to be a better admissions professional. You come back feeling like, wow, there's a lot of things that present opportunities for us that we can implement that we weren't doing. And I'm so glad I went to that session, or I stopped by the exhibit hall and met with Gil, or I didn't know that Mongoose did those things, right? Whatever the companies or the colleges or universities may be. We just announced us launching a campus in Ireland, and so many people are like, I didn't realize that. And volunteering over at the Catholic College table, having that little platform to be able to do that gives us the opportunity to spread some of the good word about what's going on at Iona.
We've recently purchased a mountain campus. One of the great things about being in Colorado, we do have access to the mountains, and we bought a 700-acre property that's going to be dedicated for our students to go and do leadership training on ethics or group collaboration, or just go up there for a weekend and write and reflect, knock out a paper you've got for one of your classes. And while you're doing it, maybe in between, you go on a great hike, or you go rock climbing, or you do the ropes course. They took the staff up there over the summer, and we've all probably gone to the rec centers and done the climbing walls. And I'm going to tell you, those can be hard, but they also have pretty obvious things that you grab onto and put your feet on. And you have an instructor saying, there's one little crevice you can maybe stick your left pinky finger in. And then over here, there's a little knob you can maybe put your right toe on from your right foot. And between those two, that'll get you up. There's maybe another rock then you can actually grab onto, but it's so much harder doing the real thing. And I was a little intimidated, not because of the heights, but I always felt like you were getting up, the rock, but you didn't really know where your next step was going to be. I wasn't fearful of looking down. Oh my gosh, I'm so high up. It's like, how do I keep getting to the top? Like, where's my next step, my next grab? And thankfully, the instructors know the rock really well. And they can say the little teeny crack that you can't see. And sure enough, later on, you end up making your way to the top, and the views are pretty amazing. And you feel a great sense of accomplishment. So we're hoping we're going to provide that for our students as well. And a number of our students have never been there. They've never been to the mountains. So we're hoping to open those doors for them.
And with that, we're going to put the NACAC Conference for 2023 in our rearview mirror. What a blast and an enormous opportunity to learn, connect, and share with each other, as well as recharging our batteries for another year of important work. Thank you so much again for joining us, and thank you again for our guests. Once again, you can find contact information for our guests and more in the episode notes. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on FYI.
Discover future applicants, delight enrolled students, and amplify fundraising performance with our Cadence Engagement Platform's live chat and chatbot solutions. Designed exclusively for higher ed by higher ed professionals, Cadence helps you engage your audiences with the perfect balance of AI and personal connection. We leverage proactive outreach and anticipate common roadblocks, knowing the most significant decisions often start with the smallest conversations. Our powerful AI ensures instant support and is smart enough to know exactly when to hand off to a staff member. And if nobody is available, it allows for easy follow-up. Effortlessly integrated with your website, we proudly feature an industry-leading 85% self-service rate. It's never been easier to make every message count.